This week, President Trump said the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel would be extended. But here on their border, the question is ceasefire? What ceasefire? Today, Israeli strikes hit Lebanon, with 4 declared dead so far. The death toll of this conflict is estimated to be 2,500, as the IDF and Hezbollah exchange fire at escalating cost, both sides accusing the other of breaking the ceasefire.
We have to be honest, the Lebanese government, they have no control of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is sending rockets trying to sabotage the ceasefire, and Israel, we have to retaliate. Every time we see a threat, we take action. And I think the main question is whether the Lebanese government is capable of enforcing a ceasefire.
But Israel too has a record of breaching agreements, as another attempt by Pakistan to broker a meeting between the US and Iran collapsed. Today delegations were set for Islamabad. But as the US claimed a deal was possible, Iran said there would be no direct talks. The conduit would be Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Here the Prime Minister greeted Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi like an old friend. But as the Iranians left, the Americans cancelled their flights.
And breaking right now, President Trump just moments ago exclusively telling me over the phone that he has unilaterally canceled Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner's trip to Pakistan to meet with the Iranians. The president says it's not worth his people making the 18-hour flight when he says we have all the cards.
Just weeks ago, Iran and the US appeared closer to a deal with Pakistan again, the middleman. But today they cannot even sit in the same room. Iranian officials have been Israeli assassination targets, and trust is a commodity in short supply. Military bravado is in abundance. On the Strait of Hormuz, Iran released videos claiming control, as America said the same. Conflict over this crucial route is just one of the barriers to a deal, in a process defined by talks that were not talks and ceasefires that have not stopped strikes, in a pattern across the region. This is Gaza today. Among those to be buried is a baby, a young mother and her unborn twins. Their lives were ended by Israeli strikes, despite the October ceasefire. For every delay and diplomatic failure, this is a reminder of what's at stake.
Well, I'm joined by Elliot Abrams, who was the US Special Representative for Iran and Venezuela during President Trump's first term. He served in senior foreign policy roles for President George W. Bush and President Reagan, too. Thanks so much for joining us. And hopefully we'll get to President Trump's relationships with his NATO allies in a bit. But first to the Middle East. We've just heard that Donald Trump has pulled his team literally as they were about to get on the plane, by the sounds of it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think on that, you cannot blame Trump. It seems as if the real change is in Tehran, with the IRGC refusing to allow an actual negotiation. And if that's the case, why would you send your people over there to talk to the Pakistanis? Doesn't make sense. We can do that by Zoom. I think the problem really is we don't know who is fully in charge in Tehran. There does seem to be a bit of jockeying there as to whether they want a face-to-face negotiation.
And yet we hear Donald Trump also say today, we hold all the cards. I mean, how true do you think that is?
Well, it isn't true, obviously. The Iranians have some control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the kind of talk that Trump often engages in.
But exactly on that point about who does and doesn't hold the cards, I mean, quite critical here, if they ever get to talks again, is, for example, the nuclear question. And yet it's being reported that the Iranians are saying the nuclear question for them isn't even on the table.
Well, what has motivated the president for about 20 years is something that his predecessors also said. They cannot get a nuclear weapon. If that's their position, that is, they will continue to seek one, continue to enrich uranium, try to rebuild the program. It's a formula for more fighting, I'm afraid.
But I mean, there is a very strong argument being made by Donald Trump's critics that actually Iran has much more uranium now at various enrichment levels, accumulated after, in fact, because President Trump pulled out of the deal struck by Obama. Is his best hope getting back to that position with the Iranians?
No, that's getting back to the Obama nuclear deal of 2015, which gave them the right to enrich and simply delayed their nuclear weapons program by about 10 or 15 years, which is where we are today. Iran was enriching to 60%. No country has ever done that without going on to build a nuclear weapon, and it shouldn't be permitted. So I do hope some kind of agreement is reached. But if it isn't, then whatever is left of their nuclear program will continue to be destroyed. I think most of it is pretty well destroyed.
So briefly, if you would, where do you think this goes next?
Well, I'm hopeful that through the Pakistanis or someone else, there can at least be some messages going back and forth. If that doesn't work, if there really is no agreement at all, and we've got some time now, then I am hopeful that the American closure of the Strait of Hormuz to Iranian ships will squeeze their economy so much that even if they're not willing to talk today, they will in 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
Because one of the arguments that is consistently made about Iran is that victory for them is just about survival. And they can hang on much longer than clearly President Trump had imagined initially.
Yes, but the strain right now when there's no fighting is not all that great. It is a question of who's going to blink first. And what Trump is arguing is that their economy, if they cannot import or export by sea, is going to collapse.
I mean, just moving on to President Trump's current relationships with his NATO allies. Yesterday's leak from the Pentagon saying the US might review its neutral position on Britain's claim to the Falklands has caused some alarm. I mean, is it a clever tactic by the president?
I don't know if that ever got to the president. That, was on a list of things, nasty things that could be done to NATO allies who he felt were not sufficiently supportive. But I do think the king's visit is an opportunity to discuss this. My advice to the king would be, remember the Chagos Islands and the Diego Garcia base. What he should be saying to the president is, if you want us to get out of that particular location, the Falklands, because you think it's an imperial possession, well, there are other imperial possessions too, like Diego Garcia, that you don't want us to get out of. So I think he can make a pretty strong argument that these so-called imperial possessions are actually very important and useful for the West, not just for the UK.
OK, it'd be interesting to see what argument the king does make. Elliot Abrams, thanks very much for talking to us.